Hi everyone, welcome to the exam prep seminar. For those of you who were here last night for the assignment writing, be much similar vein to that. We'll work through things, I'll get you to explore your techniques and compare them to what is the best techniques. And I'll get you to compare them to techniques I used to use, which are probably the worst techniques anyone has ever tried. Back in my younger days, far too long ago. This week will be fairly low key, and then the following weeks we'll get into the science of how to prepare for exams, knowledge retention, as well as have some of the other tutors to provide some insight based on their experience and their studies. So yeah. Tips from me will definitely be not what not to do, rather than what to do. And hopefully you can align yourself with the better techniques and away from the ones that I used to use. So yeah, you're going to evaluate your own exam preparation, not so much what you're actually doing, but your preparedness for your exams. I was a very bad student. In high school, I did everything last minute. Did really well knowing the topics, knowing the concepts. But when it came to exams, I couldn't retain any information. All I wanted to do was play sports. And as I got closer to university, I sort of realized it was more and more pertinent for me to become better at studying. No, I didn't do that very well. I used to, my exam preparation techniques involved taking 2 weeks off. I would do very little work during the semester, do my assignments, and then I would take 2 weeks off, and then I would cram. For 2 weeks, I would study 18 hours a day, have about 20 coffees and Red Bulls, do the exam, and then what do you think happened after I walked out of the exam? After the next day? What do you think happened to all that information? Exactly. I lost all the information. I forgot it. It disappeared out of my brain. So what happened was, the way that university study works, you have prerequisites. So the first subjects lead into the second subject, into the third, in your fourth semester, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, if it's a 4-year degree. So as I went along, you're supposed to do, let's look at, the first semester is cell biology, for my science degree anyway. Science, cell biology, chemistry, statistics, and academic writing. The next semester, just coming in, was biological chemistry. So what, I've got 2 subjects. I aced, I got like 85+%. I'm the smartest person in the whole world. You know, high GPA. But then I got to the second subject. It required the prerequisite knowledge from the first 2. So I then had to go back and relearn all the prerequisite knowledge, as well as try and learn the subject, the second subject. So I'm now doubling my workload doing things I've already done. And eventually got to the end of my undergraduate degree where, not even the end, by the 3rd year, I was so stressed out by exams that I basically had to give me alternate assessments and alter the way that I did exams. Because I got myself into such a frenzy. My study techniques were terrible. I was anxious about exams. And I just couldn't get it right. My GPA was still pretty good by the end of my undergraduate. It wasn't amazing. You know, pass is 4. I think I had 5.6 or something. So it was enough to get me where I wanted to go. but I had to work 10 times harder than everyone else. And it wasn't very efficient. And a lot of people that got the same marks as I did, they breezed through. Whereas I was an anxious wreck for, 3 or 4 weeks a semester. And then I had to work twice as hard the next semester because I had to basically relearn everything in order to understand what was to come ahead. So I hope that in doing this, you don't follow the same path that I did. Does any of that sort of exam study style resonate with anyone else? So Kelly says, yeah. Yeah, so there's that cram mentality. The more I try to put into my brain, the more I'll remember and the better off I'll be. The scientific research says differently. My personal experience says differently. Other people's personal experience I talk to says very different. So we talk about, and you would have heard in like PE when you talk about arousal level, or the level of excitement in your brain. Can you have too much or too high an arousal level? What about, can you have too low an arousal level? Does anyone know the difference? Yeah, so you and or Anna said it's too low, there's no focus. What we typically talk about when the arousal level is too high, we start talking about anxiety. This isn't like the jitters or I'm excited. This is proper sort of bone-crushing anxiety about exams. Who has serious exam anxiety? They think about an exam and they immediately tense up. So, yeah. Kelly says, yeah. Anne loves exams. Okay, you're definitely the exception to the rule there, Ali. So, some people do really well naturally in exams. Others do better in the assessments. I used to do all the assignments, and then I would add up my mark, and then I would see how little mark I could get away with in the exam just to pass. Anyone find themselves doing that? No, it's just me? Okay. I used to try to do, so Olivia says yes, she agrees with me. One of you agrees with me. Well, this is how it used to be. If I'm going into an exam thinking, how little can I get away with? What's the lowest mark I need to get to pass? Do you think I'm even in the right mindset to get a good mark? And by doing that, I'm simply increasing the anxiety around exam study. So yeah, Ali says the wrong mindset. Definitely the wrong mindset. Anxiety around exams is a serious issue. It affects over half of university students. This isn't just exams stress me out. This is serious life-altering changes in the way their brain works when they think about exams. And these changes don't happen overnight, they happen over time. The other one is too little, and that is often as well. People get anxious about exams, they stress about exams, and they become, effectively, for lack of a better term, depressed about exams. Or they begin to, my favorite ever thing to do was to procrastinate. Anyone else like to procrastinate? I'll start it tomorrow, it'll be fine. I've got 2 weeks. I've got a week. Oh no, my exam's tomorrow. So David says he loves to procrastinate. It's my favorite pastime. What do you think is the major cause of your procrastination? And it's not laziness. If you think of something that makes you really anxious, do you want to do it? So if my exam is 2 weeks away and it makes me anxious, so other things that are more interesting, you always justify why you can put off doing the thing that makes you anxious. So if you have too high an anxiety, you're not going to do it. If you're on the other end of the scale and it's making you flat and low, then you're not going to get anything. So there is a sweet spot in the between these two that you need to try and get to. You probably never get the sweet spot because, I mean, we're all human. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about sport, exam, study, there is an optimum level of arousal. So this is about 50%. Anything down here, you're not focused. Over here, you're also not focused because that's just too excited. You're bouncing around. I don't think anyone's going to get this aside from anxiety. Anxiety causes this size. This is you're hyper aroused. When we talk about a memory efficiency, down here is the point of waking. Over here is you are anxious. So there's this optimal level here at the top of the U, and that's where you want to be. You don't want to be low and flat because you got no motivation. What happens when you get anxious and you're procrastinating about doing something? Do you start looking at other things? You become off task. You do everything except the thing you're supposed to do, right? You get loads done except what you actually need to get done. So Ali says, yep. So this is dead. This is bouncing off the walls like my 3-year-old, 2.5-year-old most of the time. And there's this optimal level. Everybody's optimal level is different. When I study, I have 4 screens going. I've got loud music in my ears, and it's just a bit of chaos. Other people, how do you guys study? What do you find your optimum level is? So how do you get to this optimum level of being excited but not too excited? Where's the music, whether it's your setup, whether it's not having the Facebook and 26,000 other tabs open at the same time? And as you get closer and closer to the exam that you're avoiding doing any study for your assignment, do you notice that your stress level goes up and your procrastination also goes up? So the longer you wait, the harder it is to start. I used to think I was smart and I would do all the easy research. So Anna said music to block out all the noise. Sorry, Ali said music to block out all the noise. Unpinning all the applications from the taskbar and having everything that you need all over your desk. So some people need this perfect setup that is just simple and beautiful. Here's my desk. So it's chaos at the best of times. Everything legal on my desk, do I? No. But it's chaos at the best of times. And everybody's different. But as you procrastinate and your stress levels go up, so does your arousal and so does your memory. So at the end of the day, if you're stressed, you're jittery, you're not going to retain anything. The more you try to retain, the more you try to cram, the less you actually retain. Anybody notice that the more they try to cram, the less they understand at the end? So it's about working in chunks. Well, I shouldn't, I'll skip ahead on the slides. So the more you try and do, the less you get done. Anyone else to-do list writer? So Ewan is another exception to the rule. Some people can cram, but Ewan does not recommend it. So I have a to-do list behind me on my whiteboard, and it's only half the whiteboard. But what I notice is the more that I wrote on that whiteboard, do you think I got more done? The more things I write up there. So no, I do not. I put loads of it, oh, I'll get this done, and then all I do is do the easy stuff, but then I go, I can't bother doing the rest of it. And then in 4 days' time, the board is just filled with stuff I don't want to do. And that is not the most efficient way to do things, I can assure you. So, weightlifting and studying. When we're talking about arousal level, do you think you should use the same methods to prepare for a weightlifting competition mentally and psychologically as you should study? You want to go into your study calm. So you want to go into, you will go into your study the same as you went into a weightlifting meet. You want your arousal levels to be at the same level. I would recommend slightly calmer for study. So Damon says, yes, we need to keep that arousal level, as Damon said, in the optimal point. And the optimal point for weightlifting is probably here. It's off the charts. You want people slapping you on the back and, you know, sniffing ammonia and all kinds of crazy things before they go out on stage. But you probably don't want to do that for study. You want to keep it in the middle somewhere. So optimal arousal for weightlifting is up here. Studying is somewhere in the middle. Now everyone is different. And people's moods are different on different days. Some days you might want to go in with classical music. Others day I want to put my headset on and blast the loudest, angriest music I possibly can into my ears. Everyone's optimal is different. That's what I'm trying to get through to you here. So that everyone has an optimal level. The optimal level is not stressed out of your mind. Nobody's optimal level is stressed out of their mind. So the first thing is mental health. Anxiety will affect your ability not only to study but to do everything, and then that also affects your ability to study. So you have to make sure that you're looking after yourself from a mental health perspective. Again, I'm not a licensed doctor or psychologist, but from my own personal experience, anxiety will take away your ability to study properly. When you're feeling anxious, do you take the best route to a solution to a problem, or do you take the quickest route that will take away your anxiety? So Ali says the quickest, Kelly says the quickest. So when you're feeling anxious about something, you don't do the best work you can. You do the least amount in the shortest period of time that quells your anxiety. And that's not a character trait. That's not like a character defect. That's just the brain protecting itself. So now we're looking at the pathophysiology of anxiety. That is that the brain is wired to reduce anxiety before doing the best work that you could. So you have to make sure that you are looking after yourself from an anxiety point of view. Anxiety can cause depression can cause anxiety, so on and so forth. But they dramatically affect your abilities to focus. Anxiety was the most common one with exam, but it will make your mind so jittery and so out of control, and you're not thinking straight, you won't retain anything. The other side, which is the sort of the depressive side, or the depressed, or the low, or the sad side, is the other way. You just won't have the motivation. And anxiety, because if we look back at that chart, anxiety increases your arousal massively. So it will not allow you to retain information. I know that for a fact. Ever get into an exam and you know exactly what it is in your brain, but you can't put it through to the paper? You know the answer in your head, but you can't put it onto the page. Usually that's a side effect of anxiety. You get into an exam and you just stare out the window and 10 minutes goes past. And then you look down and you go, oh no, I've been staring at this for 10 minutes. So that's what we call dissociation, and that happens again because of anxiety. The brain switches off. Sometimes that's like a cognitive processing thing. Yeah, so the brain will switch itself off and dissociate when the stress levels get too high. So you're sat at your desk, you're stressing about your exams, and all of a sudden you start reading an article, and you're not really reading anything, but 10, 15, 20 minutes goes by. That's what they call dissociation. That can be a good tool when you're studying, which we can go through, to try and distract yourself from the chaos of life and just zone in on what you're studying. But again, that's for another week. So we talked about procrastination. We procrastinate because the thing that we don't want to do is really scary. Now, in reality, so if we look at, again, a little bit of physiology of anxiety, when we're anxious about something, the body doesn't realize that it's not a real problem. So when we get anxious, it's the body's fight or flight response. So the body only knows that, okay, these chemicals have been introduced. There must be a bear in front of us. Our brain hijacks that and tacks that same process onto exams. And all of a sudden, the exam is the bear ahead of us. If we go towards that bear, we will die. Now, all of a sudden, we look at the exam. If we go to that exam and we study for that exam, we will die. But we won't, as Ali has said. Unfortunately, when we're talking about anxiety, and exam anxiety is so common within students. I would say every student suffers some variety of anxiety towards exams. So we procrastinate because our brain's telling us, hey, if we do that thing, we're going to die. And people say, stop procrastinating, it's easy. But it's not always that easy, is it? You're not just avoiding it because you don't want to do it. It's your brain playing tricks on you. And that's why it's so important to try and remain. Yeah, so you and Anna said that it can be really hard and scary because in your mind, sorry, that was Anna, you know that it's not this big deal, but you can't break through. And that's the difference when you're talking about anxiety. Anxiety about exams. Your body thinks the exam is a bear that's coming to attack us. We need to run. So, anxiety around exams is very, very common, and it's getting worse and worse. The more pressure you put on yourself, guess what? The worse the anxiety gets, the worse the procrastination gets. So take it easy on yourself. The more you stress, the more anxious you get, the more pressure you put on yourself, the more you procrastinate. And guess what? The more you stress, the more anxious you get, the more pressure, the more you procrastinate. So it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's absolutely horrible. So, and my point of what I'm trying to say is that good exam study techniques come from looking after yourself, mentally and physically. So, but if you think that there is anxiety, some anxiety is a good thing. Do you think that some anxiety about passing is a good thing? Because if we look at that arousal curve, we have to have some anxiety. We have to have some level of arousal. We have to have some level of stress. I won't say stress because stress is a negative term. We have to have some level of anxiety. Anxiety exists for a reason. Anxiety exists to protect us. Whether it protects us from a bear, whether it protects us from a bad exam. So anxiety, and I kind of weaponized my anxiety. So I used it to try and drive me even further and further and further and further. Because I could, but it just meant that I never ever stopped. But there's a very, very fine line between helpful anxiety and not helpful anxiety. If we didn't have anxiety, we would go towards the bear without care. But we do care about our exam. So everyone has an example of where anxiety took over in an exam when you were doing something where you just went, I'm just not doing it, it's too scary and too hard. I could think of, I can't even count how many times I've said that. It all becomes too much, the anxiety, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm dropping out. Because the anxiety is looking for the quick fix. Your brain's looking for the quick fix from the anxious thing. So how good does it feel when you go, I'll do that tomorrow, I'll procrastinate? How good does it feel? It feels amazing. Because the big scary thing is gone. The bear or the exam is no longer there because you're doing something else, you've distracted yourself. And then you get that stress the night before the exam, and then you've got 2 weeks of anxiety that comes flying at you like a freight train, and then you're trying to cram the night before. So you're just setting yourself up for pain, effectively. Do we make great choices when our anxiety peaks? No. So Ali said, nope, we definitely do not make good choices when our anxiety is high. And I'll keep going over these so that they sink in. We will make our brain will make choices that reduce our anxiety, not the best choices for us overall. So I'm not going to show this in here because it's about 5 minutes long. Don't have that much time. But this 4-7-8 breathing, that once you do start to feel the anxiety, you start to feel stress, then this breathing technique brings you back down to earth and allows you to think through the decision you're about to make. So again, have a look at it. It might not be for you. It's worked really well for me when studying, when I start to rock back and forth from stress. I haven't studied for 6 years now, though, so, or 5 years. But if I ever did start, I would be relearning how to do this. Okay. Let's say, I'll paste a link. It should be in the slides that you've got. I can't open it yet. I'll send it later on. So, I'm really bad at this. Working in either small chunks of time So 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off, I used to work really well, depending on what I was doing. So I used to take an assignment and I would break it up. I'd write out the report section, headings in sections. And then I would fill in the research, and then I would do the introduction, and then I would do this. Because what does looking at something as a whole make us feel? If you go, I've got a week to do this, but it's 10,000 words, oh my gosh, and then you just start stressing out. Or, okay, I have 10 weeks worth of work to learn in 2 weeks. So you either break it up into chunks, so the logical chunks, so things that are together. So if it's an assignment, I know we're talking about exams, but it still applies. You break it up into the sections. If it's an exam, you break it up into the topics. A really good way is to look at the learning objectives for all of the weeks that you're studying. That will tell you what you actually need to know. So if your teacher gives you a textbook, if your teacher gives you a lecture, so PowerPoint slides, they should have learning objectives. And that's what you need to know. And studying those is always the best place to start, as opposed to trying to learn absolutely everything. I recently started tutoring a biochemistry student, second year, uni. 1 week's lectures was 282 slides. What do you think she did when she looked at that? She just went, oh, I don't know, help. So yeah, she just avoided it. So what I did is I said, okay, here are the topics we need to know. Let's break it up into chunks. So we cut the document, physically cut the document up into like 20 usable chunks. And immediately it was like, okay, you know, this bit's easy. But because she was looking at it from top down, all she could see was 282 slides. We chopped it up into smaller bits. I said, do half an hour at a time. When I get stressed, I sit there for hours and hours and hours and hours. I don't leave the computer. I don't eat. I don't drink water. I drink coffee and energy drinks when I need to do a lot of work. Definitely not the best way. So I used to do 15 minutes. We used to do with our students 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off. So for every hour, you would do 45 minutes work and 15 minutes. And what we found was that the students that did 45 on, 15 off got more work done, and it was better quality. So, you know, you can try that, do 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off, do something completely unrelated to what you're doing. Yeah, so Ellie says 30 minutes, 10 minutes, it's up to you. But sitting there for hours and hours and hours without disengaging is not the best way. Now, I'm very stubborn, and it took me a long time to accept that the way I was doing things was not working, because I was getting good grades. So my undergraduate GPA, I think, was 6.5 or 5.6. For my postgraduates, they were 6.75 and 7. So the 7 is perfect. And I sort of adjusted the way that I studied. I didn't get any smarter. Let's be clear. Certainly didn't get any smarter. I certainly didn't work any harder. I just worked smarter. I think for one of the, yeah. Anyway. So this is my wife's biggest gripe with me, because we run the business together. And that whole whiteboard there can be filled completely with like 6 lines of things. Yeah, so Ali's dad, exactly right. Work smarter, not harder. My whiteboard could have like 200 things on it. Half those things don't even need to be done. They're just put on there for the sake of it, because I'm in that mode of writing a big long to-do. So you pick an X amount of tasks per day, and that's all you do. If it takes you an hour one day, it's done in an hour. If it takes you 4 hours the next day, it's done in 4 hours. But break it up into manageable chunks on your to-do list. Smarter, not harder. So music is deeply personal. Some people study in silence. I'm definitely not one of them. So Ali, some people like classical music. Sometimes if you're trying to study and do complex maths and you've got dubstep or some crazy electrical music in your head, maybe your arousal level goes too high. But I'm one of those weird people that the more the music speeds up and the more it gets more intense, my brain slows down. So it's one of those deeply personal things. I can have my headphones in listening to heavy metal and I can go to sleep. So it's personal. Find what works for you and stick with it. That's all I'll say about music, because everybody's different. Setting the scene is making sure your desk is not like mine. So Ewan/Anna have said they get distracted by trying to choose the right song. So just put a playlist on. But that's also you distracting yourself because you're anxious about what you're doing, in my opinion. The music is a convenient distraction. So do what I do. You've got, I don't know if you have wireless headphones, put whatever's playing music as far away as you can. And then you'll get lost in whatever you're doing. So there's this concept of sort of dissociation. If you completely dissociate, that's really bad because you just sit there staring at the wall. And yeah, for among other reasons, it's bad. But if you can slightly disengage from everything around you, ever been there where you've sat there and you've been working and you don't even realize what's playing, how long something's been going for? You might have 4 hours and you go, wow, it's 4 hours time. And that's from this very slight dissociation. And that is when you get memory being built. If you're thinking about 20,000 other things behind you, so you've got everything going around, do you think anything's going to sink in? If you're still in everything that's going on around you, everything that's stressing you out, school, parents, friends, whatever, do you think there's the most efficient way for information to settle into your brain? So this ever so slight dissociation is really critical to taking in everything. So you don't want to sit there and dissociate so that you just stare at a screen for 4 hours. But you also don't want to be sat there soaking in everything that's going around. So this is so important, is going in with a goal in mind. Don't just go, I'm going to read every page of this textbook. You don't get anywhere doing that. So I talked about the learning objectives in the textbooks and slides you might get given by your teacher. The best place to start, because you're looking through the information, trying to answer the question. what people do is they get an exam. Here's the practice exam. Who just learns how to answer the questions on the practice exam? So this is where, and anybody that's had tutoring from me before will know that I don't answer exact exam questions for people, even the practice exam. Because all you do is learn how to answer that question in that context. Do you think you're in an exam, you're going to get the same questions? The answer is no. They will flip the question on its head. So sometimes they do, not very often. They will flip the question around on its head. So the idea that you study how to answer that question, then if they flip that question around, you don't know how to answer it. So you need to have a goal in mind. I want to learn, look at the exam question, figure out what concepts it is, and then learn those concepts, apply those concepts to the question. Don't look at the question and study the question. Study the concept behind the question. Okay, was always my biggest issue, and is now actually, sleep. So 6 to 8, anywhere up to 8 hours is optimal. Below 5 is bad. Anything more than 9 or 10, there's no benefit to sleeping that long. When you start to lose sleep, when you're only sleeping 4 to 6 instead of 6 to 8 hours a night, you begin to accumulate fatigue. Accumulate fatigue over time. And even less, if it's even worse, the less sleep you go, so each hour you lose, just accumulation of fatigue gets considerably worse. And you can't think. When you sat there at school, when you haven't slept, you just sat there kind of staring off into space. Not only are you tired, your motivation is poor, your arousal is too low, and you got nothing. Too much sleep, and it's the same. I mean, you guys are teenagers, so it might be different. But at the other end, you also have the same problem. So there's this sweet spot of sleep. Lack of sleep increases anxiety and depression as well. So if you're already anxious and you're not sleeping because you're anxious, guess what happens if you don't sleep much? You get more anxious. So then you don't sleep as much, and then you get more anxious, which causes your stress and your anxiety levels to go up. Then you sleep even less, and it's this vicious cycle that it's really hard to break. So making sure you're sleeping properly is a big part of preparing. That's why I called this week the holistic approach. So everything, not just this is how you study for exams, but this is how you prepare yourself through the whole year of schooling to get to the end of your exam. So diet is also really important. If they talk about athletes fueling their bodies, well, you need to fuel your mind as well. We have micro and macronutrients that the brain requires. You don't eat enough. The brain takes 60% of the glucose that you ingest. So you don't eat enough, your brain is not going to function as well. You're not getting as many nutrients, micronutrients, macronutrients. All you're eating is ice cream and chips. Can start to wreck your physical health as well. So diet is, again, equally important. Not just for maintaining your weight. Again, it's not something I'm going to comment on because it's not really relevant for exam study. But just keeping your mind healthy. Distractions. And you never notice that when you want a distraction to be there, conveniently it will be there. So you're procrastinating. Oh, look, I conveniently found something. So preparing the room, preparing your computer, preparing your desk, preparing people around you. You want to study for 2 hours? Tell people, just don't even come into the room. Don't tell your parents I said that. But the moment someone walks in, yep, put your phone away. My phone is currently on the other side of the room. Yep. Look at that. How convenient. The thing I don't want to do, I've now been conveniently distracted by. Shock. So managing distractions, we all know what we're distracted by. To say that I got distracted by this accidentally, it doesn't, we don't accidentally get distracted by things we know we get distracted by. Okay, so any questions with regards to what we've spoken about today? So Ellie says you can get where it disables all the apps, so you can't, not getting any through your phone. So, any questions? If not, I will leave it there.